Yeah, that that one's gonna stick with me for a while.
Your Locked On Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode did just want to let you know it is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. With that out of the way, I was trying to think of how to even talk about this one because, coming into Game 6, I felt a lot of emotion, I guess, but uh, I didn't really have the same level of emotional investment than when the news about Mark Scheifele's father broke. That I think changed the whole complexion of this playoff run, of everything around this team, and for 60 minutes plus, all it was about winning it for Brad Scheifele and for Mark and his family. And the Jets came so close. I didn't even care about the series necessarily, other than just wanting the Jets to let it go back to Winnipeg for one more moment at least, so that Scheifele could be with the fans, and that he could be with his Winnipeg family. Winnipeg fought really hard. This game from the Jets was the best road game that they've played in the whole postseason. Otter and Hellebuck were playing out of their minds, and both teams just went back and forth end to end. And of course, Mark Scheifele scored. In that moment, I probably got misty eyed. I think anyone who had a beating heart in the Jets, or maybe not even the Jets fan base, you had to feel for him in that moment. Every emotion, everything that could have possibly poured out, definitely did. But man, I just it felt for a little bit like Winnipeg was going to pull it off somehow. The miracle might continue, that it would finally happen for the Jets, and it was so close. Mason Appleton, I hope that, for all of the criticism that he's going to legitimately take for the miss, I'm sure that there's probably very few people on the face of the earth right now who would rather the ground open up and swallow him. And I know, the weight of that moment, firing it into what should have been a sheer, perfect open net. He instead buries it into Otter, who was diving across. That's going to haunt him, I know. And especially with all of the emotion and the intensity of this night in particular compared to every other game this season, Scheifele laying it all out on the line, as that famous phrase this playoffs has gone. Everyone laid it on the line. And I think for Appleton, I'm sure, and I hope that, he's able to move on from this, because that moment, for most people, would probably be just a soul crushing moment. And obviously, look, I'm as upset as anyone. I'm obviously still reeling from this a little bit, and trying to put together some coherent thoughts. But you know, the guys gave everything that they had, and it just didn't end up being enough. But if there's one thing you can't fault, it was the effort. They gave everything they had. El Hellebuck left it all out there. He looked like the Hellebuck that we've all known and loved. Scheifele laid it out there. Guys were blocking as many shots. And from the post game quotes, whether it was Arneal or Lowry, I mean, there was just so much rawness, so much emotion, and it just, this one probably hurts, I think, more than any other sporting playoff loss that I've ever watched. I've sat through some really bad ones, some really hard ones, uh, whether in person or watching it on TV. I've seen some rough ones, and this one just felt worse somehow. I think because of all of the Shifley stuff, all of the emotions being poured into this one moment. But all I can say is I'm very proud of the way the team came together, and it's incredibly remarkable that Scheifele was even able to play. I know Connor. I think he lost his father earlier. Um, you had Morrissey a few years ago. You had Pionk losing his best friend. And, whenever something like this happens, it's always out of the blue, or it can often be out of the blue, right? And I think that was the case for Brad, and, no one expected it. And in those moments, having dealt with a lot of loss myself recently, it can just sort of feel like all of the air is sucked out of your lungs. And yet Scheifele went out there and put on the best performance that he could. He even scored. He showed incredible grit, determination, and courage. And so, I think that's the truest reflection of being a Winnipeg Jet. And so, no regrets out there. They gave everything they had, and it wasn't enough in this moment, but that's just the way life goes. They did what they could. This series has unfortunately come to an end, but how the team reacted after that moment. Scheifele, of course, ended up not only scoring the goal, but he also took the late game last few seconds penalty that ended up giving the Stars the overtime win. And Lowry immediately strides over to the box where Mark is. And I think that just says and really speaks volumes about what is important to this team, what's important to those guys, and what is probably important to us as fans as well. So just an incredibly painful loss, one of the hardest that I've sat through. I haven't felt my pulse raised quite like that in a long time. We've had close games, but I mean, this one just felt, I don't know, emotional in a way that it's so rare to see in a game of hockey. So, credit to all the Stars fans who really connected and reached out. I know a lot of them were already donating to Mark's charities that he supports into the True North Foundation. So huge shout out to those of you who did. And if you didn't, don't feel pressured at all. Just wanted to say thanks again. Really appreciate the Stars fan base for being really classy and being super respectful and honoring, Brad's memory and supporting the Scheifele and Jets family during this time. I don't know if I could have gone out there and done what Scheifele did. For Mark to come out and play that game that he did, I think is truly incredible. So, obviously all thoughts are with them and with the Jets family. So, yeah, I really wanted this game as an individual standalone moment more than anything else for this Jets team. And to hear them talk about it after the game, yeah, if you end up not having seen it yet, or if you do go watch it, just bring a tissue box. It is tough. I don't ever hear Lowry on the verge of tears like that, and he really struggled to get through his pressers. So just know that the guys are really emotionally raw. Everything that they're feeling and we're feeling, it's probably magnified tenfold in that room. So, I know a lot of folks are really pissed and angry and immediately posted online about some of the missed opportunities and moments, but it's just one of those things where right now, I think more than anything, it's just important to treasure what you have and remember that going forward. Amidst the tough loss, I think it's always hard to talk about what happens now, right? The Jets, I think for a lot of us, we're kind of expecting this to be the year, and it came short again. The Jets definitely didn't waste the year. They had an amazing President's Trophy run. They finally won more than one playoff game. They got to round 2, and I think that there's a lot to build off from here. And really, the ball now rests in Chevy's court. The summer, we're going to talk throughout, a lot of the upcoming months about what happens. But I did want to talk a little bit about at least the fact that there is hope for a brighter future for this team in just a little bit. Before we do, though, did want to chat about our friends and partners at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. If you're wondering which players are going to show up in the biggest moments and how you could track those trends, be sure to use FanDuel. They can help you find some of the biggest and most relevant stats and keep you up to date on some of the most exciting moments in these respective series. And if you are new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Hey, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we're just trying to puzzle through all of what we're feeling after what I would say is probably one of the hardest playoff runs and playoff run ends that I've ever had. You know, even compared to 17-18, it was just sports at the time, right? Tonight's game was a lot more than that. It was so much of the team's heart and soul laid out on the ice for everyone. And, you know, in those moments, it becomes less about the sport and more about the team coming together. And so when that moment falls short, you always really struggle to know how to talk about what happens after that. But I want to be at least a little bit positive, even if a lot of us are probably feeling like crap right now. I know that the team probably feels like everything has fallen, and that, you know, the fan base is ailing and hurting right now. I know I'm not really over it yet, and it probably will take me some time for that. But for the future, you know, the Jets probably thought that this was going to be the year. I certainly was hoping that it was. I think this team definitely expected to go deep, and they went deeper than they've gone in a long time. They got really close to forcing a Game 7 when all looked lost against the Stars. They gave all the fight back that they had. But I think, you know, in a lot of ways, what happened in this playoff run showed where the Jets still have room for growth. You know, under both Bowness and Darnielle, I think this team has shown glimpses of what this team can be. And it's challenging because the Jets are getting older, right? You know, this team with Hellebuyck and Scheifele, they're in their early 30s. And so time marches on, guys get slower, and things happen. You know, we lost Morrissey in this past game. The injury sounds like it's not good, which based on it hit being his knee, it could very well be a tear. And if that's the case, you know, the rehab and stuff can take a very long time, which means the Jets are going to have to figure things out, right? If Morrissey, you know, has a long rehab and isn't ready until, you know, a little bit into the start of the season, you know, you're going to have to start working around stuff. But I think where adversity always strikes, there is great opportunity. And for this Jets team, you know, they've gotten far with this core this year. And I think the way to start to think about the future is to make the youth and the players that you've drafted and developed part of your team going forward. Winnipeg has, I think, in a lot of ways, gotten away from that over the years. They're a very veteran-heavy squad. You know, you look at how they deploy their depth and stuff, and you look at how the Dallas Stars are built, and it's like two different design philosophies, right? The Jets have a lot of forechecking and grindy depth, which, you know, when the corners and stuff works really well when you are playing your brand of defensive hockey. But you look at how the Stars are, and in so many moments in tonight's game, even and throughout the series and playoffs, you know, Dodonov was making some great plays, even if he didn't quite score. You had Johnston playing a pivotal role. You had all manner of ages and skill levels throughout this Stars team contributing in some capacity. And I think for the Jets, you know, look at how all these teams are built going forward. I think Winnipeg has some stuff internally that they're starting to cook with some of these kids that they've drafted. Walton looks like he's going to be a really good pro-level contributor. You've got Barlow, who this past playoffs has suddenly found his old scoring form again. You've got Kevin He, who's been really a champion on the ice for the Ice Dogs. And you've got Chibrikov, who had, you know, a stroke of really unfortunate injury luck, not struck with the Moose, might have been with this Jets team in this moment. And you have, you know, Lambert, who's starting to figure out things after a weird season. I think he'll probably be in the NHL next year. Braden Yeager might actually be fighting for an NHL roster spot. The Jets definitely need to fix their 2C gap, and I think that that's something where a guy like Yeager might really start to push, right? The Jets very clearly got as far as they could with this group, and perhaps even a little bit farther than they should have. They won a President's Trophy, which no one thought, I certainly didn't coming into the season, that would even be possible. They advanced to the second round and were very close to forcing their way to potentially a Western Conference final appearance again, and still they came up just a bit short. And I think in those details, in those moments, this is where this summer is a really critical moment for this franchise. I feel like we say that every summer, but when you look at the playoff field, Colorado sort of mortgaged its future for what it ultimately was able to do, and it got ousted in the first round. Vegas is getting older. Some of these older established powers are starting to fade a little bit. Even Dallas is going to have its time to shine eventually wear off. And I think the Jets, even though they're definitely not immune to the aging thing, a lot of the younger players are already sort of in their late 20s, and perhaps even with the veteran guys, they're in their early 30s. This is where you really want to start using those guys that you've drafted and developed and incorporating them more. We really haven't had a lot of our young ELCs become a key part of this team. And I think if the Jets truly want to recapture what made that 17-18 team really one of the best teams not to win the cup of the last decade and a half, this is where you start. I think Winnipeg had some design on thinking about it at times throughout the season, but perhaps didn't see enough from some of their young players to really go that route. This offseason, with so many guys kind of up for renewal, maybe moving on and perhaps finding other teams, this is a chance to where I think you can start to look at doing that. And I think if the Jets play their cards right this summer, next season could be even more exciting. I don't even care if they finish in first in the Central or in the NHL again. That stuff is obviously helpful, especially winning the Central. But I think the most important thing is building a team that can truly go deep in the postseason. Winnipeg, they were a little chaotic this playoffs. It took some real demon vanquishing to get where they are, and even now they still probably have incurred a couple more because you only have one shot at this when you do this sort of stuff, and those mistakes and moments can really stick with you. But hopefully, what the Jets accomplished this year is a springboard for the future, right? You've got the banner. Now it's time to take advantage of what you've already established and build upon it with a good core of youth that you can build around. This team has a lot of stuff already in place to work with. Now it's time to really supplement and build out the rest of the roster to where, there needs to be more skill up and down the team. We saw the limitations of a lot of guys on the squad, and they gave everything they had, and you could still see where they pushed up against the realities of what the NHL is these days. But again, I think that there is a bright future for this team ahead. I'm usually one who has been pessimistic about it. I think that there's a lot that does need to change, maybe with some of the way that they deploy guys and how they look at some of their roster constructions. But that's a tomorrow problem, right? That's for them to figure out over the next few months. I think for the time being, step away from the ice, go golfing, clear your head, touch grass. That's the most important thing, right? The rawness of the moment is going to be what sticks with a lot of these guys, and it's going to make me think for a while throughout this off season. But hopefully, as we get through the next few months and prepare for the start of the season, which is going to be sooner than you think, I think that there's a lot for the Jets to build on this year, and even in the bonus years. Winnipeg would have these great moments, these inspiring feelings, and I think the Jets can actually turn that into something really concrete, especially with so much opportunity here in the West for this team to do something special. So, be sad that it's over, but look forward to what the Jets can be going forward. Amidst all of that, though, maybe the most important thing for this team is just the feeling of family and really kind of how it's been so nice that this team has really come together, whether it's been through adversity or, through these tough moments like this. I want to chat about that and sort of the difference that I feel compared to some of the previous Jets years and why it can really help this team going forward in just a little bit. Hey, friends, and welcome back to these closing thoughts on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's show as we are just kind of puzzling through a lot of mixed emotions, a lot of painful feelings. Congrats to the Stars, obviously, for advancing. It was a tough one for the Jets. It was a tough one for me. I don't think I ever really cried during a playoff loss, but this one I actually got teary-eyed. This one hurt in a way that I don't know that I've ever really felt with a playoff loss. Uh, on an emotional level, you just feel devastated for the guys. But I think if there's something that really, attests to what this team is about, it's those moments when they did lose, in those moments where they rallied around each other and truly cared about each other. Yeah, maybe it had an impact on some of the line deployments that they might need to work on this offseason. But I think for the most important thing, you look at it for what it means for the locker room and for the team, for how guys stood up for each other, for how they immediately went to one another when one of them was in pain or dealing with some real adversity. You hear it in the pained interviews that they gave at the end of the series, really fighting back tears, not because of the series result, but because they wanted so badly to win for one another. For Scheifele, for anyone else who was dealing with the loss of their dear loved ones and best friends. And so, this is probably the healthiest I think this org has felt in a long time emotionally. The Jets weathered a lot over the past couple of years. It started with Bonus, who really rebuilt this locker room into a family. The leadership group, I think, has really had to be rebuilt from the ground up, and he was a huge part of that. It really seems like it's been continuing in the Arneal era. And, it's really nice to see, for several years, we were always the subject of rumors about toxic locker rooms, guys bullying each other, everyone really being upset. And it's nice to see that as an organization and as a team and as individuals, this squad has really moved into a totally different mindset and a totally different emotional thread work. So, in moments like these, I hope it's character building, that it helps inspire them to go further than they've gone before. And I think, in a lot of ways, compared to other off seasons, I don't know why, but I just already feel better about this off season than I do normally, right? Usually when we have these moments of tremendous upsets and moments where, it just feels like the franchise is cooked, I feel like I'm more optimistic this time. I think this team's going to come together. I think that they're going to respond. And I think next year they're going to have another good season. It's going to take a while for them to get up to speed. And I'm sure if they do rely on youth, there's going to be growing pains. But I think that's really the special opportunity that this team has. Winnipeg has gotten as far as it probably can with what it's already built. Now it's time to reinforce those foundations and build upon the incredibly strong connections that this team already has. I think that, this team has shown resilience and toughness in ways that maybe in previous years it didn't. Even when they did fold on the road under pressure, this game tonight really showed that they still have another gear they can reach. And yeah, it didn't work out in the end. And, that's something that's going to have to be, I'm sure, talked about in some capacity in those moments. But I think the most important thing is they rallied, they came together, and they came very close to pulling it off. Now it's time to figure out in the offseason how to take advantage of that, how to get stronger, get that 5 to 10% better that they're still looking for, and so to kind of lean on the talent that they've got elsewhere. This team has a really strong foundation to build around. Yeah, it'll be a little older next year, part of the process, but I think this team can still be great and improve upon what they already have. And if nothing else, this team's familial connections, the way that they rally around each other when adversity strikes, I think is something that Jets fans should be beyond proud of. I've said a lot about this team's character and personality the past couple of years, and how even when they're doing badly on the ice, you feel like you respect their efforts and how hard and how committed they are. Previous years, Scheifele didn't always look like he felt engaged and like he was maybe respected on this team. And, to see him lead by example tonight in a moment where you would see a lot of other people struggle to even put those skates on and step out there, I think just really shows how far this team has come as an organization and as a family. And I hope that despite all the pain, despite the frustration, that they're able to build off of this and move ahead. I think next year we've got another special season in store. It doesn't have to lead to a President's Trophy. It doesn't have to have all that, but in a short time span from the end of the Paul Maurice era to where this team is now, I think that they have really turned things around and they have gotten a taste of what the good life is. Now it's time to go to that next level, dig deep, and find what it means to be that true playoff team. And it's going to have to be an organizational thing across the board. But I think we've come closer and closer the past couple of years, and I think that for the Jets, the opportunities continue to just be wide open. Sure, they're going to face tough teams like Colorado, Dallas, Vegas. Utah is going to be really good here pretty soon. But, if the draft picks and stuff are anything to go by, I do think that Winnipeg recognizes the moment and where this league is going, where this team needs to start moving. I think they're identifying the right things. Now it's time to get the rest of the pro team on the same page, the roster usage on the same page, because all the core pieces are there. The familial connection is there. The really strong leadership and locker room is there. Now it's time to really take it to the next level and build that championship contender. You saw how many times it took the Caps to do it before even their best teams still didn't quite get the job done. And then, the magical 17-18 squad came in. Devontae Smith-Pelly scoring one of the goals of the playoffs, of all people, right? That team finally got the job done. It took a lot to get there, but eventually they broke that threshold and made it. And I still think the Jets can do it. So I'm going to choose to look forward to the future with some level of optimism. I know my social media feeds right now are a complete mess. I think all of us are still feeling like absolute dog crap. And I won't lie, I do feel some of that too, at least. But you know what? Sometimes it's just not the most important thing, right? In the moment, I just hope that Scheifele has time to grieve the way he needs to, that this team shares that experience and does what they need to this offseason, and we'll see them in a couple of months. Again, I know it's May, but I promise you September and October will be here before you know it. So with that, we're signing off for the evening. We'll have coverage throughout this week of the offseason and kind of what to look forward to next for the Jets. But for tonight's show, that is all the time that we have. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great night. And as always, go Jets, go.